I never thought my life would turn into a cheating scandal or a divorce journey. Looking back, all the signs were there, flashing like neon lights, but I chose to ignore them. Why? Because I was in love. Or at least I thought I was. They say love makes you blind, but what they don't tell you is that it also makes you deaf, dumb, and sometimes even stupid. When I first met Lena, I thought I had hit the jackpot. She was charming, with a smile that could light up a room and a wit sharp enough to keep me on my toes. She had this way of making me feel like the center of her world, and I fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker. I should have known better. Love doesn't pay the bills or stop people from being selfish. But at the time, none of that mattered. I wanted to be her hero, her provider, her everything. Her family? That's another story. From day one, they were a handful. Her parents, Victor and Martha, were the kind of people who could talk circles around anyone, always convincing others to see things their way. Victor was a retired salesman who could probably sell sand in the desert, and Martha had this uncanny ability to play the victim, complete with quivering lips and well-timed tears. Together, they were a team I never realized was playing me. It all started with the house. Their house, to be precise. They lived in this old, creaky place that should have been condemned years ago. The plumbing was shot, the roof leaked, and don't even get me started on the wiring. It was a fire hazard waiting to happen. But Martha had this way of making it sound like a sacred family heirloom. "We've lived here for decades," she'd say, her voice trembling just enough to tug at your heartstrings. "We raised our children here. It's more than just a house. It's our home." Cue the guilt trip. Every time we visited, I'd hear the same speech, and every time I'd brush it off. "It's not my problem," I'd tell myself. But then came the kicker. They were behind on their mortgage, to the tune of $300,000. I remember the day they told me, sitting in their living room, sipping lukewarm coffee while Martha dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Victor sighed heavily, like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. "We're going to lose the house," he said, his voice cracking for dramatic effect. Unless we can find some help." I should have walked out right then and there. But no, I stayed. I stayed because Lena, my dear sweet Lena, looked at me with those big, pleading eyes. "We can't let them lose the house," she whispered, her voice soft and full of urgency. "It's their home, their legacy." Legacy? What legacy? It was an overpriced money pit. But I didn't say that. Instead, I did what I always did. I caved. "Let me see what I can do," I heard myself say, even as a knot formed in my stomach. Let me tell you, coming up with $300,000 isn't easy. I had to cash out investments, take out a loan, and dip into my savings. Savings I had planned to use for our future, not to bail out her parents. But I convinced myself it was the right thing to do. After all, they were family now, right? And family helps each other. That's what I told myself as I handed over the check, watching Martha cry tears of joy and Victor slap me on the back like I'd just won the Super Bowl. "You're a good man," Victor said, his voice filled with gratitude. "We'll never forget this." Yeah, right. I'll never forget the night it all came crashing down. We were sitting at the dinner table, Lena, her parents, and me. It was supposed to be a celebration of sorts, after everything I'd done to save their house. I thought we'd moved past the drama, that life was finally settling into something close to normal. But no, life had other plans. We were halfway through Martha's infamous meatloaf when Lena cleared her throat. That sound, that tiny, unassuming sound. I didn't know it then, but it was the drum roll before the fireworks. "I have something to say," she announced, placing her fork down with deliberate precision. Her tone was calm, but her eyes, those eyes I'd fallen for, held something else. Guilt, maybe? Or was it just a flicker of nervous excitement? I couldn't tell. "Go on," I said, trying to keep my voice light, but my stomach was already doing somersaults. She looked at me for a long moment, then at her parents. Victor nodded slightly as if giving her permission to speak. That should have been my first clue. They all knew. They were in on it. "I've been seeing someone else," she said, her words slicing through the air like a blade. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. Surely she didn't just say what I thought she said. "Excuse me?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She didn't flinch. "I'm in love with someone else," she repeated, her tone firmer this time. And then, as if that wasn't enough, she dropped the bombshell. "You need to pack your things and leave. I've got someone else now. Someone better." The room went silent. Not the kind of silence that feels peaceful, but the kind that feels heavy, suffocating, like the world is holding its breath. I looked at her parents, expecting shock or outrage, maybe even a hint of sympathy. But no, they just sat there, smiling. Martha even had the audacity to give a little nod, like she approved of what her daughter had just said. "Someone better?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything I'd done, everything I'd sacrificed, this was my reward? This was how they repaid me? "Yes," she said simply, her voice devoid of any emotion. "It's time for us to move on." Just as I was about to respond, the front door opened, and in walked a man I had never seen before. He was tall, well-dressed, and had an air of arrogance that made my blood boil. Lena's face lit up as she turned to him. "Alex," she said, her voice dripping with affection. "I'm so glad you're here." Alex. So this was the affair partner, the man she had left me for. He smirked as he walked over to Lena, placing a possessive hand on her shoulder. "I told you it was time to end this," he said, his voice calm but filled with condescension. "You don't belong here anymore." I felt my fists clench at my sides. This man, this stranger, was standing in my house, telling me I didn't belong. The audacity of it all was almost too much to bear. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "You think you've won?" I said, my voice low but firm. "But you've forgotten one thing." Alex raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Oh? And what's that?" "The house," I said, pulling out a stack of documents from the drawer beside me. "You remember that $300,000 I gave your parents? Well, it wasn't just a gift. I had them sign over the legal ownership of the house to me. It's mine now." Lena's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" I handed her the documents, my hands steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Read it yourself. The house is legally mine. You, your parents, and your new lover are trespassing." Alex's smirk faltered as he snatched the papers from Lena's hands. He scanned them quickly, his face growing darker with each passing second. "This is bullshit," he spat, throwing the documents on the table. "You can't just take their house." "I didn't take it," I said calmly. "They signed it over willingly, and now I'm giving you 5 minutes to get out before I call the police." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Then Lena started to cry, her tears flowing freely as she realized the gravity of the situation. "How could you do this?" she sobbed, her voice breaking. "I didn't do anything," I said, my voice steady. "You made your choice and now you have to live with it." Alex grabbed Lena's arm, pulling her toward the door. "Let's go," he said, his voice tight with anger. "We don't need this." As they left, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. The house, once a symbol of toxic relationships and betrayal, was now mine. I had taken control of my life, and for the first time in a long time, I felt empowerment after betrayal. In the weeks that followed, I found myself again. I threw myself into work, picked up hobbies I'd abandoned, and reconnected with old friends. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The house, once a battleground of betrayal, had become my sanctuary, a place where I could breathe, think, and grow. Every now and then, I'd hear updates about Lena and her parents. They were struggling, living in a cramped apartment and trying to piece their lives back together. I didn't take pleasure in their misery, but I didn't feel bad for them either. They had made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. As for me, I was finally at peace. The betrayal had hurt, yes, but it had also taught me something invaluable: my worth. I had spent so much time giving, sacrificing, and bending over backward for people who didn't deserve it. Never again. From now on, I was putting myself first, and let me tell you, it felt damn good. One evening, as I stood in the backyard watching the sunset, I thought about everything I'd been through. The lies, the manipulation, the heartbreak. It had all shaped me, taught me lessons I wouldn't trade for anything. I had learned to stand up for myself, to value my worth, to let go of people who didn't deserve me. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. Free from their expectations, their demands, their betrayal. Free to live life on my terms. And let me tell you, there's nothing sweeter than that. This wasn't the ending I had planned for myself when I said I'd do. But in a way, it was better. Because it wasn't just an ending, it was a new beginning. And this time, the story was mine to write. Don't miss out on more powerful stories like this. Subscribe now and share your thoughts in the comments below.